You are about to become a Sicilian Mafia boss, from the very bottom rank to the very top. Every decision from here is yours. But first, there's one scene you need to see before we begin. 19 years from now, you will sit at a table across from a man who has already decided you are going to die tonight, and you will not know it. You will pass him the bread. He will pour your wine. And somewhere between the first course and the second, his hand will drift toward his lap, toward the thing resting on his knee under the tablecloth, and the only question left in the world will be whether he pulls the trigger before dessert arrives. Hold on to that table. We are coming back to it. Right now, you are 17 years old, standing in an alley behind a bakery in Corleone, Sicily, holding a paper bag that is heavier than bread should ever be. You do not ask what is inside it. Nobody has to tell you the rule. You already feel it in your chest, the way you feel a stove is hot before you touch it. You do not ask. You carry. You disappear. A man in a gray suit is watching you from a doorway across the street. He will not nod at you. He will not smile. And in 4 seconds, he will vanish around the corner as if he had never been standing there at all. This is how it always begins. Not with a gunshot. Not with a ceremony. With a bag you are told never to open, in a town that has buried more secrets than it has ever buried people. Here is what nobody tells you at 17, holding that bag. In the next 2 decades, you will not just survive this world. You will conquer it. You will give orders that make grown men's hands shake. You will sit in rooms where the fate of an entire island gets decided over espresso cups nobody ever finishes. And then, on one ordinary night, at one ordinary table, it will all be taken from you in less time than it takes to eat a meal. Power like this was never built to last. It was only ever built to fall, and the higher you climb, the more people are counting the days until it does. This is your life, rank by rank, inside the deadliest brotherhood Sicily ever produced. Cosa Nostra. Our thing. It starts, like it starts for almost everyone, with a bag you are told never to open. Rank 1, Picciotto. You are not a member yet. You are barely a person to them, in the way that matters. You are a Picciotto, a boy, an errant runner, a set of legs and a closed mouth that belongs to someone else. You run messages nobody is allowed to write down. You watch streets and report who walks them. You deliver envelopes to shopkeepers who hand you cash without meeting your eyes, because they know exactly what the envelope means, and they know exactly what happens if the envelope goes unanswered. This is your first lesson in the word that will define the rest of your life. Omertà. It is usually translated as silence, but that translation is too small for what it actually costs you. Omertà is not just refusing to talk to police. It is refusing to acknowledge, even to yourself, even in your own head at 3 in the morning, that any of this is unusual. You learn to see nothing. You learn to have seen nothing, before you have even finished seeing it. You do this for years. Nobody promises you anything. Nobody tells you when, or if, you will ever be more than a boy carrying bags he is told not to open. And then one day, a car stops beside you on an empty road, and a man you have run 100 errands for opens the door and says 4 words that change the rest of your life. We want to talk. Rank 2, Soldato, the made man. The ceremony happens in a backroom you will never be able to find again, even if you tried. There is a saint's card. There is a pinprick of blood on your trigger finger. There is a flame held to that same card, and you are told to hold it while it burns, and to say the words that mean if I betray this family, may I burn like this saint burns. You are now a soldato. A soldier. An uomo di onor, a man of honor, which is the phrase they use, without a trace of irony, for men who have just sworn to kill on command. You have a capo now. A direct superior. You do not report to the family. You report to him, and he reports up, and the chain continues past you into darkness you are not cleared to see. This is not an accident of organization. It is the entire design. No soldato ever knows more than one link up and one link down. If you are caught, you can only burn the man directly above you, never the men above him. The investigator who would eventually understand this structure better than any Sicilian judge before him was a man named Giovanni Falcone. He did not break Cosa Nostra with force. He broke it with patience, years spent mapping the compartments, the cells, the walls between soldiers and bosses, until the structure that was designed to protect the organization became the very blueprint used to dismantle it. You do not know this yet. Right now, you only know that you have a gun, a rank, and a family that will feed your children if you go to prison, and bury you with honor if you die keeping your mouth shut. You are told one more thing on the night of your initiation, and it is the only promise they ever fully keep. The organization does not end when you do. It simply finds the next boy standing in the next alley, holding the next bag he is told not to open. Rank 3, Capodestina, commanding your own men. Years disappear like this. Slowly, and then all at once. 10 years pass. Or 15. You survive 2 attempts on your life that you were never supposed to know were attempts. You do everything asked, and you ask nothing in return, because asking is the fastest way to be seen as ambitious, and ambition, at this level, gets men killed before it gets them promoted. Then, without ceremony this time, you are given your own decina. 10 men. Your men. You are a Capodestina now, a crew leader, responsible for a piece of territory that generates money the way a river generates current, constantly, quietly, in a direction nobody upstream ever has to think about. Your income does not come from theft. It comes from something far more efficient. Piso. Protection money. Nearly every shop, every construction site, every olive grove in your territory pays you a percentage, not because they are afraid of losing their business to a rival, but because they are afraid of losing their business to you. You do not think of this as extortion. Nobody around you does. You think of it as an old agreement, older than the Italian state itself, older than the borders drawn on the maps in Rome. Cosa Nostra existed in Sicily's countryside before Italy was Italy. The government has never fully controlled this island, not really, and men like you have always been the ones who actually did. You begin attending meetings now. Real ones. Not errands, decisions. You sit at a table with other Capodestan and you learn, for the first time, how much blood moves quietly beneath a territory that looks, from the outside, like nothing more than sun-bleached stone and slow afternoons. And you learn something else. Something that will matter more than anything else you learn in this life. Trust, in this world, is not a feeling. It is a liability with a shelf life. Every man at that table is calculating, at every moment, how much of you he can afford to lose if you are ever arrested. Rank 4, Consigliere, the mind behind the throne. Not every climb is built on violence. Some are built on being the only sane man in a room full of killers. You are not the most violent man in the family. You never were. What you are is useful in a rarer way. You think 3 moves ahead, in a world built almost entirely out of men who think 1 move at a time. The boss notices. And instead of giving you more soldiers, he gives you something far more dangerous. He gives you his ear. You become consigliere. Counselor. The man who is present for every decision but responsible for none of them on paper, which means, in this world, you are simultaneously one of the most powerful men in the family and one of the hardest to convict. You settle disputes between Capodestan before they turn into wars that spill blood onto streets and attract the one thing everyone in this family fears more than a rival family. Attention. You develop relationships that never appear in any file, a contact in the regional government, a cousin inside the carabinieri, a magistrate's assistant who owes your family a debt neither of you will ever say out loud. This is the part of the Mafia that the movies rarely show you. It is not only guns and blood. It is patience, leverage, and an almost invisible web of obligations stretched across decades. A journalist and historian named Alexander Still would later spend years mapping exactly this, the quiet cooperation between organized crime and pieces of the Italian state itself, in a body of work that helped explain to the outside world how something this violent could also be this embedded, this normal, this permanent. You begin to understand, at this rank, the actual architecture of power in Sicily. It was never a war between the Mafia and the state. For decades, it was a negotiation, and you are now one of the men doing the negotiating. Rank 5, Sotto Capo, the underboss. The call comes at 2 in the morning, which is how the most important calls in this life always seem to come. The boss wants you as his Sotto Capo, his underboss. The second most powerful man in the entire family, the one who runs daily operations so completely that most soldiers below the Capodecisian level will go their entire lives without ever meeting the man at the very top. You now control everything beneath you and answer to exactly one person above you. You approve killings. You approve peace. You decide which family disputes reach the boss's desk and which ones you resolve yourself, because a boss who is bothered with everything is a boss who eventually makes a mistake, and mistakes at this level are not measured in money. They are measured in bodies. There is a phrase used inside Cosa Nostra for the way certain problems disappear without ever becoming a headline, a trial, or a grave anyone can visit. Lupera bianca. The white shotgun. It means someone was killed and disposed of so completely that not even a body remains to prove a crime occurred at all. No corpse. No case. No end to the not knowing for the family left behind. You give orders now that result in this. You do not enjoy it. Very few men at this level do, whatever the films suggest. What you feel, mostly, is a kind of narrowing, the sense that every year you climb higher, the room you are allowed to feel anything in gets smaller. And there is a shadow following you now that was not there at the lower ranks. Every underboss knows the same statistic without anyone ever having to say it aloud. The second most powerful man in a criminal family is, historically, the man most likely to either inherit the throne or be removed to make room for someone else's. Rank 6, Capofamiglia, the boss. He dies the way most bosses of that generation eventually died, not from age, not from illness, but from a rival's decision that his time was over. And within days, before the blood has even finished drying in whatever back road became his final resting place, the family has already decided. You are Capofamiglia now. The boss. The head of the family. Every Capodecina answers to you. Every soldado's life, in some abstract but very real sense, belongs to a decision you might one day make. You control territory that spans towns, industries, and a portion of Sicily's economy so large that legitimate mayors and magistrates quietly factor your family into policy decisions they will never publicly admit to making. You take a seat now on something called the Cupola, the Commission, a council of bosses from across Sicily's Mafia families, formed to prevent the wars that used to tear this world apart every few years. In theory, the Cupola exists to keep the peace. In practice, it exists to decide, collectively, who is allowed to keep breathing. This is the world that a man named Tommaso Buscetta once lived inside completely until his sons and his brother were murdered in a war between rival factions of the very organization he had sworn his life to. In 1984, Buscetta did something no boss of his standing had ever done before. He sat down with Giovanni Falcone and talked. Not for money. Not for a shorter sentence, though he received one. He talked, by his own account, because the Cosa Nostra he had sworn loyalty to as a young man no longer existed. What remained, he said, was something crueler wearing its name. His testimony became the foundation of the largest trial in the history of organized crime, the Maxi trial, 338 convictions, an entire criminal architecture exposed in a courtroom built like a bunker because everyone involved understood exactly what kind of people were on the other end of that verdict. You are the boss now. And somewhere, underneath the seat you have just taken, is the exact same fear that made a man like Buscetta finally talk. Every man you command is a man who could one day decide to stop protecting you. Rank 7, Capo dei Capi, the boss of bosses. You still don't know about the table. Not yet. Somewhere out there, it is already waiting for you, a date not yet set, a man not yet chosen. But first, there is one more rank to climb. There is one rank above Capofamiglia, and it is not really a title. It is closer to a reputation so overwhelming that other bosses simply stop contesting it. Capo dei Capi. Boss of bosses. The man who does not merely sit on the cupola, but effectively controls it, whose word ends disputes other bosses would otherwise have gone to war over. A man named Salvatore Riina held this position for more than 2 decades, through a campaign so violent and so absolute that historians would later call it a war Cosa Nostra waged not against outsiders, but against itself, eliminating rival bosses, absorbing their territory, and building a level of centralized control the organization had never had before and would never fully have again. You are here now. You are the closest thing this world produces to an emperor with no crown, no palace, and no official existence at all. You are wealthier than men who run public companies. You are more feared than men who run armies. And you are, in one specific and unavoidable way, more alone than you have ever been in your life. At every rank below this one, there was always someone above you to defer to, a decision you didn't have to make, a consequence you didn't have to fully own. Not anymore. Every order now begins and ends with you. And this is the part of the story that every boss before you has arrived at eventually, whether he wanted to admit it or not. Rina spent his final years as Capo dei Capi living as a fugitive, not in some fortress, but in an ordinary apartment in Palermo, under a false identity, moving almost nowhere, trusting almost no one, for 23 years. In January of 1993, that finally ended. He was arrested a short distance from his own home, and the empire he had spent decades building through fear did not collapse in an explosion. It collapsed quietly, in an unmarked car, with 2 officers reading him his rights. He fall. You will not be told the day it happens. That is the last mercy this life offers you. You never see the ending coming, because if you did, you would have spent your final free years living in the fear you spent your entire climb pretending you didn't feel. Maybe it is officers at your door before sunrise. Maybe it is a rival, closer to you than you ever suspected, deciding your time is over the same way you once decided it for someone else. Maybe it is a man beneath you, a soldado, a capodecina, someone who swore the same oath you swore, burned the same saint's card you burned, sitting across from a prosecutor, deciding that Omertà was never going to save his children the way he once believed it would. Whatever it is, it comes. It always comes. Every boss who ever built something in this world discovered, eventually, that the thing they built was never a fortress. It was only ever a very slow-moving trap. Remember the table. The bread, the wine, the hand drifting toward a lap under the cloth. Maybe it happens exactly like that, a rival you trusted, a meal you never should have accepted, a decision already made before you sat down. Or maybe it happens quietly, in handcuffs, in an unmarked car outside an apartment where you have been hiding in plain sight for years. The details change from boss to boss. The ending does not. Somewhere, at some table, someone is always deciding when your story stops. 3 things this life teaches, if you survive long enough to learn them. First, power built on fear requires constant maintenance, because fear decays the moment you stop actively renewing it. A boss is only a boss for as long as the next man believes disobeying him costs more than obeying him. The instant that calculation flips, for even one man, in one weak moment, the entire structure is already finished. It just hasn't announced it yet. Second, every layer of protection you build around yourself is also, eventually, a layer of exposure. The compartments that shielded you as a soldado become the compartments that trap you as a boss. The men you trusted with your secrets are the same men holding the only evidence that could end you. Basetta didn't destroy Cosa Nostra from the outside. He destroyed it from a seat exactly like the one you're sitting in. Third, and this is the one almost nobody at the top wants to hear. The climb and the fall are not 2 separate stories. They are the same story, told at 2 different speeds. Every choice that takes you higher, every rival removed, every witness silenced, every soldier who learns exactly what happens to men who talk, is simultaneously building the case, the enemies, and the informants that will one day bring you down. You do not rise and then fall. You rise by falling, slowly, in a direction you cannot see until the descent is already finished. The boy in the alley never knew any of this. He only knew a bag he wasn't supposed to open, and a man in a doorway who never smiled. Maybe that was the only honest moment in the entire climb. Before the oath. Before the silence became a religion. Before the rank, the power, and the empty apartment where it always, eventually, ends. Your story in the underworld might have ended, but there are always more secrets waiting to be told. If you want to keep stepping into the darkest corners of history and the criminal mind, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications, because your next seat at the table is already waiting.